Hello, thanks for joining me for another video. I am back in Automobilista 2 because I wanted to do some comparison. This time I'm looking at the Caterhams because we've got an Academy version, a Supersport version, a Superlight version, and the mental one. I'm going to take them all back to back around a racetrack, probably something short like Brands Hatch Indy for a couple of laps just to get a big feel for each car and see what the differences are, and then hopefully provide some commentary to that effect. So if that sounds interesting to you, stay tuned. Right then, here we have the Caterham Academy, which is the least powerful out of all of them. It's got 115 horsepower, weighs in at 620 kilograms, has, according to the game, 219 newton meters of torque, and uses a 5-speed H pattern. So it should be fairly lively actually, given that its weight's quite low. Let's find out. Okay, here I am in the Academy, which is as I said, the least powerful of all of the Caterhams on offer. I'm running this at default setup with factory driver aids, which means there is none, and that would be the case for all of the cars. And as you can see, I'm using Brands Hatch, and this is the Indy layout. So I've done a couple of laps already in this machine, and it's actually quite fun. I expected it to be woefully underpowered, but it's a little bit more lively than I expected. Doesn't pick up tremendously quickly, as you'd expect from having quite a low power output, but in high enough gear you can actually get, low enough gear you can actually get the rear end out. Has got a tendency to push wide. I think there's quite a lot of understeer. So as I dab the brakes there, I can really induce a little bit of oversteer coming down the hill from that first corner. And as we shift the weight around into Druids, sort of a combination of understeer on the way in and oversteer on the way out. It's pretty controllable. But of course the car doesn't really have huge amounts of power, so correcting is a little bit of a dicey proposition. Easily get a tank stopper going. It's quite fun to drive though, and I can imagine this would be a good machine to have some pretty close-knit racing with, given that it's, as I said, the power output's limited. So I think with you could probably have close racing with a range of skilled drivers. It wouldn't have to just be a field full of really good drivers. You could have some intermediate guys as well, and providing they could keep the tail in check, then might yield some pretty good racing. What I do notice with this though is it does tend to lift off oversteer quite easily. So as soon as you put more weight onto the nose, either with the brakes or by taking your foot off the accelerator, then this sort of stuff happens, so the car will go sideways. It's kind of a similar sort of behaviour to a go-kart. So I'm going to apply lots of brakes through turn 1 now, and I bet you it will just spin around circles. So they go right sideways, but I am correcting it and using the throttle to bring it back in line, which, you know, is totally possible. So the lack of power doesn't really inhibit your ability to control the car. It's actually pretty good fun, this is. You can really chuck it about. Right, so that's enough of that. this is the Academy. Let's move on to the Supersport and see how it compares. This is the Caterham Supersport. It has 125 horsepower, so 10 more than the Academy had. It's also a little bit lighter at 600 kilograms, has the same torque figure at 219, but this one uses a 5-speed sequential. Now that's according to the game. However, the game model, the car model, actually looks like it's got a H pattern, so I'm not quite sure what's correct here. So this is the Supersport, and performance wise it's quite similar to the Academy, as you'd expect, because it's only got like 10 horsepower more. But one thing that I can tell you already is that it's a lot more stable in terms of oversteer and understeer. It's far more precise when turning in. It doesn't seem to understeer a hell of a lot. You can still induce lots of oversteer. As you can see, so coming through that corner then, I just had a little bit too much weight on the front, and it started to go. But like the Academy, it's very controllable. And there's another aspect about this car, is that it revs a lot higher, so you might notice the change lights don't seem to work. That's because you've got to really wring the neck out of this thing. It reminds me of my old Integra DC2 Type R. I mean, I can't even get the thing to light up down the straight there. But it is a lot more precise. You can really just point it and it will go in the direction that you want, whereas the Academy had a tendency to understeer, so you either had to turn in a little earlier than you usually would, or turn in and expect some understeer and just have your foot ready with a low enough gear to handle it, in terms of getting a little bit of extra rotation going. So yeah, I think this is capable of performing a lot better in terms of, you can probably get more cornering speed out of this car, despite the fact the power is very similar. I would think that this would go around a circuit quicker, just simply because it's just so much more precise. It's not giving me hardly any dramas on the rear, and I'm not a particularly good driver here. So you can see it is moving the rear end around quite a bit, but it's so controllable. So I'm going to try and really wring the neck out of it now on this lap and see if I can actually unsettle it. Now the game did say that it's a sequential, but looking at the model here, it looks like it's actually a H pattern, so I'm just going to treat it as such. Yeah, it just feels like it's got a lot more grip on the front. It's just it's so easy to get rotation, and you can just really rotate the thing around the corner just beautifully. Yeah, I really do like this car. I think this would be a really good one for close racing. Yeah, it's certainly got Honda VTEC levels of revs going on. I don't know if you're familiar with Honda's VTEC system, but I used to own a JDM DC2 Integra Type R, and it produced about 190 horsepower with a 1.8 litre engine. But where most cars would be running out of revs at around 6,000 RPM, it was just coming alive, and that's where you drove it, between 6,000 and 9,000 RPM. It was an absolute animal, and this car reminds me of that. It's got a real sense of theatre about it. Anyway, let's have a look at the Superlight. Right then, the Caterham Superlight comes in at 175 horsepower, so quite a big step up from the Supersport. It weighs a bit more at 630 kilograms, has the same torque figure, 219 newton meters, and this one uses a 6-speed sequential. Now again, I don't know if that's actually sequential or a H pattern. I'm not sure if Reese have got their facts right here. Really don't know. It's the same about the torque figures. I don't actually know what these cars produce torque wise. I'm sure they're actually quite different, but the game information here says that they're all the same. So let's see how this one does. Right then, so here I am in the Superlight. This is 175 horsepower. Feels a lot faster than the Supersport does, for obvious reasons. I think it has the same sort of understeer tendencies as the Academy, but there's just a lot more power on tap to sort it out with a bit of oversteer. I think it's actually kind of a halfway house between the Academy and the Supersport in terms of precision. It will push wide slightly or will resist turn in, but it has got a little bit more accuracy, I think, than the Academy did. Again, it's got that same sense of theatre as the Supersport in terms of it revs very high. You've got to get it to sort of 8,000 RPM before all of those lights are lit. But because it's got more power, it gets there a lot quicker. It picks those revs up much faster than the Supersport does. And once you're driving on that sort of limit, I suppose, and as I say that, I just go off the track, I find that the car becomes more predictable and more stable than it does at lower speeds. So oversteer's exactly the same as the others in terms of it's very easy to induce lift-off oversteer. If you put too much weight onto the front of the car, then it will go around. But then of course, you know, you've got a big engine up front, you've got very little weight at the rear, apart from the driver. So it's very easy to get that rear end lift. But if you go through a corner under power, then it feels like you've got all the grip in the world. You just got to manage that understeer right, and as soon as you get the car set up, and you can just plant the throttle and it'll go through that corner. Not like this. That's a bit rubbish, that is. So yeah, this is I'm not sure on what's correct here, whether or not this car has got a sequential gearbox in the real world, because the model here looks like it's H pattern, but the car info says it's sequential, so I'm not sure on what to think here. I'm using it in H pattern. Just because that's more fun. Yeah, so I think this would produce some pretty close racing, and because it's got that extra power, I think that it's a lot more fun. So right as of this moment, this car is my favourite out of all the Caterhams. Let's have a go of the 620R and see how many times I die. So this is the 620R. It has 310 horsepower, so massive hike up. It weighs 656 kilograms, so again it's heavier. The torque figure is the same, and this one is using a 6-speed sequential according to the game info. So here I am in the 620R, and as you can see that this thing is just designed to kill you because they've taken the roll cage off of it, giving it 310 brake horsepower, and oddly enough though, despite the fact that its roll cage is missing, it actually weighs more. So it's 20 or 30 kilograms heavier than the Superlight was. Yeah, so as you might notice, I'm driving quite slowly around here because whenever I put my foot down in this, I die. This one I believe is a sequential. It looks like it's got a sequential knob. Knob joke, I know. It's childish. Let's go and see what this thing can do. So, 310 brake horsepower, and it's already an absolute shit ton faster, and it won't steer. So I'm thinking that this has got a similar sort of understeer trait to the Academy. So it feels a lot faster than the other two, or even three. But coming from the Superlight, which has 175 horsepower, this is considerably more than that, and actually picks up considerably faster than that. So I'm only grazing the accelerator there, and I can induce oversteer. Just slightly touching the accelerator, and it's trying to oversteer. Now again, of course, this car has the same sort of weight dynamics as the other two. It's very heavy on the front, very light on the rear, so it's easy to induce oversteer in terms of using the brakes. But this time we can induce oversteer with the accelerator anytime we want, because it's just got so much surplus power. I've got to be honest with you, this car exceeds my abilities. Just drifting around Druids. I mean, if you look at the pedal cam, I am putting such a small amount of throttle input in. And it's just going sideways. It's actually quite controllable, but any little undulation in the track as well, if you've got a lot of revs on, that will cause the rear end to start skipping. We're going off. Yeah, nothing I could do there. Yeah, got my entry to turn one wrong. So again, this will rev to about 8,000 RPM, but it will get there without any trouble whatsoever. So yeah, I think in the right hands this car could be an absolute machine. But in my incapable paws, it's not going to yield any good sort of lap times at all. I think for me, the Superlight is the the right car for the job, because it's a good mix of power and balance. This for me has got a little bit too much of the former. Although the oversteer is controllable, and you've got to be really on it when you're entering corners. You've got to get the car set up correctly. Because if you come in too fast, like I did then the only option is to slow down, because you're just going to understeer otherwise. And I could have tried to induce oversteer to rotate the car, but what that would have just done is pushed me wider. But it's just phenomenal, the amount of oversteer you get from such small amounts of throttle input. So it's good for doing stupid shit like that, but that's not fast. That's not a fast way to go around a corner. It might look good in a film if there's a police car chasing me. Yeah, this thing's mental. Well, I'm gonna leave that there. Okay, so I hope you found that interesting. Certainly good fun to drive all of them and have a direct frame of reference in which to compare them all against each other. I think for me, the Superlight is the best of the bunch. Having 175 horsepower, it's got enough power to make it interesting, but it's still really controllable, and it's got a good balance between understeer and oversteer, I think. The Supersport equally, that was really precise. It was much sort of tighter. You could get around corners much tighter than any of the others, I felt. And of course, these are just my opinions, so you might, find it different for yourselves. But I felt that was the case. So I think the Supersport and the Superlight would be really good cars just to have some really close racing with. If you've got a load of guys that are sort of around similar kind of skill level, they would yield really close racing. Equally, the Academy, that would as well, but I think, quite frankly, I'd probably get bored there because there's not a lot of go in that car. You've got to really sort of force it down the road. As for the 620R, it's beyond my skill level. That thing's just an absolute riot. I think if you had a load of a load of drivers who were just comfortable with going sideways and had a lot of car control, then that would be a good one to pick. It's certainly fun. It's got loads and loads of power, but for me, it's just beyond my abilities. That's why I like the Superlight, because it's kind of in the middle of the slower ones and the really crazy one. Anyway, I'm going to leave a video there, so thank you very much for watching. If you liked that, then drop me a like or a comment or whatever you want to do, and I shall see you next time. Thanks for watching.